All right, I'm Barrett Davis.
I'm Cody Coons.
I'm Jordan Rothstein.
And I'm Ayushi, and this semester we worked with Noridian Mutual Insurance for our capstone project. So brief outline of our presentation, we'll go over the company overview, their history, the problem that they want us to solve, and the solution that we provided them, the schedule that we followed, and the progress that we've made so far this semester. And then we'll also go over the risks and issues that we've had throughout the semester, as well as looking back and summarizing what we've done and the next steps for Noridian to take. So first off, we're going to go back and forth between Noridian and Blue Cross Blue Shield because Blue Cross Blue Shield is the parent company for Noridian Mutual Insurance, and it merged in the 1940s after the Great Depression for North Dakotans. And it really helped them out to the point where the enrollment had skyrocketed by the 50s and 60s, and so, which is why in the 60s they finally got their first computer to manage all their employees and customers. And so moving to 2018, their problem is that they would like to have a patient perspective on respective treatments for once they file a claim. And they want, with this result that they gather after like 30 days when the claim is filed, they'll use the information to find treatments, find patterns among the treatments, and reimburse successful doctors. And so our solution is building a mobile app for Noridian that will send out surveys to patients based on their claim number that they have processed. And these surveys will be then recorded into a secure database that will then be pulled out, and the information will be pulled out to make nice little reports to find patterns and for Noridian to do their work. And so with that, I'll hand it off to Cody, who will go over the design for the app.
All right, so this is a diagram of the pages we decided to create. Our first one over here is the first page you'll see when you pull up the app. It has a username and password that you enter in that goes to an account database. Then we have the create account, which leads to this page over here, which you enter in your username, password, and then you confirm your password. And when you hit register, that also puts that account into our account database. When you hit the login page, that takes you to this one over here, which is a page that has all the surveys that are available to be taken by the patients. Those surveys are in our claims database, which user will file the claim, that claim number, after a certain amount of days after it's processed. We'll eventually send a notification to the app, which will pull up the survey to be available to be taken. Once you click on that survey, it'll take you to this page over here, which will pull up a survey based on the diagnosis code. Each diagnosis code is unique, so it'd be like if you had a cold, a broken arm, broken leg, each one would have its own unique survey that would pull up, and they would go ahead and fill that out. You have buttons here so you can either save if you didn't have time to finish it, so you wanted to come back to it later. You can either hit back, and that would save your current progress as is, and it would take you back to this page over here where it has all the surveys. And then you can hit submit, and that will pull up a notification, notify you that whether it was successfully submitted to the database where it has all the answers and all the survey answers, where it collects them all and everything. This is a diagram showing the architecture, the three-tier architecture that was originally planned that we were going to base everything on. We have on the top right over there where our app would be in our admin page. Then in the middle is where our app API would actually be, which is what would be used to communicate with the database and servers at Noridian, where it would store all the info. But this way it would increase security so that you wouldn't just be able to straight access the database and servers and all the info in them straight from the app. It'd have to go through things to get there. The hypervisor is there it's a software that creates and supervises virtual machines so that you can run all this on the servers. And then next will be Barrett talking about our schedule.
All right, so first up, I'm going to go through our semester so far. So our first step, a couple weeks into January, we met with our mentor, Chris Speaker. We met him at Noridian. He gave us a tour, introduced us to several of his engineers, which turned out to be very helpful. It was also there that we started to plan our project. We figured out that we wanted to use Xamarin to make it easier for cross-platform development, because we want to do this for Android and iOS. We decided on our version control, which is Subversion, and we really just sorted out the details of our project there. Then over the next few weeks, we actually did some Xamarin tutorials, tried to do more research in mobile development, since none of us had ever done anything like that before. We'd only really done web applications, so this was totally new. And then once we had felt more comfortable with that, we did start coding our app design pages, and we obtained a server from NDSU that we were going to use to load the database on. And this is about where the midterm happened. And so our original plan was to get the database schema from Noridian. That proved difficult because Noridian is a secure company. They obviously can't give us access to their database, so they had to prepare something themselves that we could run on our own server. And that ended up just never happening. So our next plan was to create our own mock database. We were going to use a MySQL server, set up a MySQL database, and we did do that. But unfortunately, we ran into some problems with that, which I'll touch on more later. So at that time, though, we did create a MySQL database, and we created data to populate it. And then once we ran into those issues, which I will talk about again later, we reevaluated our goals with Chris some more, and really just refocused on front-end development of the app, and talked about how we're going to hand the project over and started to prepare for that. And then here's just our weekly schedule. We tried to meet at least 3 times a week. We met every Tuesday with our mentor and discussed our progress for the week, what we got done, what went well, what went bad. Thursdays, we met as a group to work on our weekly reports and to sort out any miscellaneous problems that we had with the code on our own. And then we usually met on the weekends at least once to do some coding together. And I'm going to be tossing it off to Jordan, who will be giving a brief demo of the app.
All right, so here's like a brief preview of the pages of our app. The first page you're greeted with when you open the app is a login page. Just enter your email and the password to log in. From there, there's a create account button. If you do not have an account, you can go click on that. It'll take you to the create login page. You can enter an email and then a password and confirm a password. You'll hit submit. It'll verify that the 2 passwords are correct, and then it should, in theory, create an account. From there, from the login, you log in and you're greeted with this page. It's the main page of the app. Basically, it'll list off all the surveys you have to take, stating like the doctor's name, where the doctor's office was, what date it happened on, so you know kind of what survey you're taking and for what treatment you had. And from there, you click on that survey. It'll bring you to a survey where you can put in all the answers, symptoms you had, whether you enjoyed your treatment or not, if you'd like to schedule another visit, and then you can, hit back to go back to the main page, submit to submit your answers, or save to save them for later. And since our emulator has kind of been finicky over the course of the semester, whether it be not loading correctly, taking a long time to load, or just having generic problems, I prepared a video showcasing it off to avoid any of these issues. So alright, once here you see the icon for the app. Once you open the app, it'll bring you to the login screen. From there you can create your account. You can enter an email and your password, whatever you'd like it to be. Here we just have an example of John Johnson, whose password is password. And right here, he submits, but he doesn't confirm his password, so it gives him an error saying the passwords do not match. Here he matches his password, and it takes him back to the login screen once he submits his account. There he can enter his email, and then his password, which for the first time it entered incorrectly. Forgot the D at the end of it, so he'll submit that, but it's not the correct password, so it'll throw a red error. He'll correct it, and it'll bring him to this page, where he can select this survey that's for him. And on the survey, there's a bunch of questions and answers. He can select them. Yes or no answers, check boxes for him to check off. And then once he's done, he'll hit submit. And right now, that doesn't really do anything since we're not hooked up to a database at all. It's just kind of showcasing that our app does have these basic functionalities, and once there's a database to connect it to, it should be simple to implement all the functionalities needed. And now I will hand it off to Barrett again, who will give you the risks we faced.
All right. I just decided to take a couple of our most important risks and issues that'll be on the next slide. So our first one is that Noridian, being a secure healthcare company, security is very important for them. They don't want to leak any of their patient information, HIPAA. So we wanted to make sure that the app is up to their standards. Part of that includes encrypting the data. And unfortunately, again, we just don't have access to a lot of Noridian's resources. So we talked with them, and they decided that they will do their own encryption on the data. And we just shouldn't worry about that for now. And then our next one is that the app side API coding might not match up with the Noridian database schema. Like I mentioned earlier, we aren't actually connected to our database right now. So right now our variables are more or less guessing what their database schema is going to look like. So it's going to be more extra work for them when we do pass it over, because we don't know exactly how their tables look. So we're just going to comment our code and do our best to make it really obvious what we're doing. And then for our issues, this is the big one. This is the one that's kind of been haunting us this whole semester. We can't actually connect our database to Visual Studio. Like I said earlier, we weren't actually able to get the database schema from Noridian, so we had to create our own database. And when we did that, we created a MySQL database, which we found out later doesn't play nicely with Visual Studio. While we were able to create databases on our server and we were able to populate them, we couldn't actually connect it to our Visual Studio project without creating a complicated API for that. So again, when we reevaluated our project a few weeks ago, Chris, our mentor, said, just don't worry about that. They will worry about that themselves, since they'll be using an Oracle database anyways. It'll be a different format. And then our last issue is with the refocusing of our project, we actually will need Noridian to edit some of that API. So again, we're just going to try to make our code as obvious as possible. Like I said, we're commenting it. We're trying to use good variable names so that when we do pass it over to them, it'll be obvious what they need to change, or hopefully it'll just work out pretty well. And then I'll be passing it on to Cody with our postmortem.
So one of the goals we initially wanted to do when we started the project was at the very end, after a bunch of surveys have been filled out and completed and sent to a database, we wanted to be able to compile a report of all the surveys themselves, so to give you like a quick summary to see what people answered for all their surveys. Unfortunately, we weren't able to reach that point. We just didn't have enough time, and with not being able to fully connect to the databases, it was a little bit of an issue. And then the database issues we had, we weren't able to get the schema like he said, because the security involved with it, the info in there, they can't just give that out to people who aren't necessarily with the company and who don't have authorization to view the info that's in them. It was even hard to just get a mock one from them. We weren't able to even get that because it was hard to, because it was too much like what they actually have there. And then we had a little bit of trouble with Xamarin and our APIs. We had to learn about mobile development in general. None of us had worked on anything like that. Learning the new language in Xamarin was a little difficult. And then also coding an API, which none of us had done before. And then also the databases were more complex than what we were used to. So that took a little work to get going. Last thing was when we were able to take the tour of the company, which was very helpful and informative. We just learned, I guess, how much was going on there and how much you had to go through to get certain things, which was why it was a little hard, along with the rebranding and restructuring going on, for us to get some of the info and resources we needed from BCBS and Noridian. We just learned that they have like lots of teams going on there. We met their IT team, their security, some people from their software development team, their database development team, and how they all worked together and did things there. Next will be Jordan telling you about the next steps for Noridian to take.
So basically, next steps for Noridian, once we hand off our application to them, they'll want to have to create a web API to interface with their app to connect to the database. Once they do this, it's basically just implementing all of these functions we already have the generic functionality of, because right now ours is just basically hard-coded. It's substituting our hard-coded stuff for a dynamic stuff, like a dynamic thing from a database per account basis. Next, they'll have to host the database on their own secure servers, since I'm pretty sure ours on the NDSU servers won't be available forever, and also aren't just secure enough for them to use. And also just to have their app secure enough for their HIPAA standards, be it the login or whatever patient information and doctor information is being displayed to the users. They'll need to make sure that no one will be able to access information they shouldn't be accessing, and also the information that's being displayed is correct information that should be displayed to that specific patient.
We'd like to thank Chris Speaker, who's not with us right now. He is doing Army duty stuff. But he's been super helpful. He met with us every week and has been extremely encouraging of all our ideas. We'd also like to thank Guy Hokinson, the IT guy for our computer science department, and Mike Sanders and Durga Podell from Noridian Mutual Insurance for helping us out with creating and trying to connect databases and trying to figure out what our problem was. And also North Dakota State University for allowing us this opportunity to do our capstone. And so yeah, are there any questions?
I guess since you mentioned that you were using Xamarin, presumably for cross-platform reasons, have you done any testing at all in iOS just to see how much of it worked, or was that something that didn't even really enter in at this point?
So Chris did, initially he did want us to do both cross-platform, but then halfway through the semester he wanted us to focus on Android, which is why we just tested everything on our Android.
Okay.
All of us have Android phones and Microsoft computers, so it wasn't very easy for us to test that.
And there's really no readily available iOS emulators. It seems that any that are ever in production, Apple shuts that down pretty quickly, so we couldn't really find anything like that to test ours on if we were to do it cross-platform.
You were using the emulator. Did you try running it on real phones?
Not yet, but theoretically, if it runs on the emulator, it's running the same file that would be ran on our phone, so it should work on any phone or any Android device if it's working on the Android emulator.